Morning, colleagues. Morning, everyone. I'd like to call on the Deputy Premier to lead us in prayer.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the privilege of being here together this morning. We thank you for the many blessings that you have given to our three islands. Father, we ask you to continue those blessings. We ask you this morning to be with the chairman, lead him. We ask you to be with each member that is here, each person that will participate. We ask you, Father, that these proceedings will be done in harmony for the best interest of our small countries. We ask you again, Father, to be with each one of us here today. We ask this in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Please be seated. We will begin this morning's meeting of the Finance Committee with examining the appropriations to the Minister of Education, Youth, Sports, Agriculture and Lands. We begin by looking at the first output group, EGA 1, Policy Advice, Governance and Ministerial Support Services. $6,103,744 in 2018 and $6,576,646 in 2019. Are there any questions?
Mr. Chairman, before you take questions, if I could have your indulgence just for a quick moment to let you understand the background from which this ministry prepared its budget. I took the position that as the new Minister of Education, and that education should never be a football within this country because of his paramount consideration, and it should always be the interest of the children that is the overriding factor. I allowed the Chief Officer and his technical staff to put together the budget because they're the ones who are on the ground and in the classrooms for this particular 2-year period. So that's the way I intend to participate in Finance Committee. Questions dealing directly with the budget, I'll channel through my esteemed Chief Officer. If there are political questions, legal questions, or other questions, then I will answer those questions for the avoidance of doubt. Okay. I thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Member for Bodden Town West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I also want to give the Honorable Minister the assurance that we on this side of the aisle consider that there are some things that shouldn't be political, and education is one of them. And I can assure you that whatever questions that we'll be asking won't be political based, but rather more on policy than anything else. So with that said, Mr. Chairman, through you, sir, just my overall question, and recognizing that there is already an increase in this budget in terms of the annualized cost year on year of over $800,000. The one thing that I would just like to know, is there like an overall education plan strategy? What goals we're working towards, and in essence, what does the ministry think or consider success to look like? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank the Honourable Member for that question. Yes, indeed, there is an overall strategy. Obviously, there's a transition in the ministry, so there'll be some fine-tuning, but the position that we take, and the Chief Officer can augment if he so desires, is that education is mandatory for every child within the Cayman Islands, regardless of your creed, your color, your race. Obviously, I'm a Caymanian politician, so my first priority are to Caymanian children to ensure that they're properly placed, and our goal is working towards a first-class, world-class education for all. In order to do the latter, I believe that is where the fine-tuning will come in. I believe that every child has the responsibility to have a highly qualified teacher. I would like to see the day when there are Caymanian teachers, but I'm a realist because of the jurisprudence that we have, and we're a service-oriented center. We will always have, for some time, foreseeable future, to get teachers from abroad. I was the beneficiary of teachers from abroad. The difference that I see now is that for whatever reason, they're name call-ins in some of the classroom based on the information that I get. And I want to move towards a teaching profession where they see the child, as a canvas that they can do their particular landscape and painting. Also, Mr. Chair, I also want to see us to where we have the proper infrastructure in place, because for so long there's not been the necessary investment, not one particular government, but all governments, because of the finite amount of resources that we had. But in order to have our children move on to a world-class education, we need to have that. And that's why you'll see in this budget the majority of the money going towards the John Gray School to ensure that we get that right and we can have that completed before 2020.
Member Freeston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, let me echo my colleagues' sentiments on education. It is, I think we all share the view that whilst this is politics and it is required to get things done, politics should not involve provisions for children. For too long, we have failed in seeing the bigger goal. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask the Minister, the council, the Education Council, the newly formed Education Council, can we get some kind of understanding of the makeup, not necessarily names, but the type of people and the objectives of that council, albeit that it's relatively new and some of that may not be available as of yet.
Thank you, member, for the question. Through you, Mr. Chair. The member, as with all honorable members, be fully cognizant that the recently passed education law mandated the majority of persons who could be on the board. I took that as a springboard for the new movement for the education system. I spent an inordinate amount of time and delayed purposely the appointment of the board because I wanted to make sure that we had the very best persons on the board to take the new direction for education in this country, moving towards world-class education. We have a very, very capable chairman in the man of Mr. Dan Scott, and I'll ask my chief officer to refer to the section of the education that mandates who should compose of the board and the names if he has it in his possession. But I am very, very happy. I went the extra mile to appoint them only for 1 year to give me that exit clause if necessary, if I need to do further fine-tuning. But as to date, I'm extremely happy with them. The chairman and I have open communication because the last minister ensured that the minister could give directives to the board, and we are doing it in partnership. It's a tri-partner relationship with the chief officer, myself, the chairman of the board, to ensure that our children will get the best that we can offer within the fiscal constraints that this country faces, like many other countries around the world today. I'll turn it over to the chief officer.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. Kristen Saku, Chief Officer, Ministry of Education, Youth Sports, Employment, Youth Sports, Agriculture and Lands. Apologies. The Education Regulation, Section 3, stipulates under Part 2, the Cabinet shall appoint a maximum of 15 individuals as members of the Education Council, including the Chief Officer or Chief Officer's designate, the Director of Department of Education Services, at least 3 individuals nominated by the Minister in the Minister's discretion from among persons having expert educational opinion in the areas of compulsory education, special education needs or disabilities, early childhood care and education, technical and vocational education and training, and post-compulsory education. 1 individual nominated by the independent schools or assisted schools, 1 individual representing the business community, and 2 individuals who ordinarily reside in Cayman Brac or Little Cayman and who are involved in education or community development or the business community. Further to the Minister's statement on the makeup of council, as she has confirmed, Mr. Dan Scott is the chair of council. Councillor Barbara Connolly is a member and deputy. I am also a member of the council with an ability to designate. Mrs. Monteith is member as Director of Education Services. We also have Jacqueline Ebanks, Mrs. Shauna Haylock, Miss Deborah McLaughlin, Mrs. Deborah Thompson, Mr. Woody Foster, Miss Nola Bawden, and Mrs. Claudette Lazary from Nebraska, Mrs. Christina Bawden, Mrs. Maxine Bawden Robinson, Mr. Darrell Rankin, Mrs. Cindy Scotland, and Secretary to the Council is Mrs. Kimberly Kirkconnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I just want to share my sentiments of my other colleagues in respect to making sure that this conversation is a fruitful one and not a political one. Though sometimes some of the questions may come off that way, I can promise this committee and the listening audience and viewing audience that ultimately my goal would be just to get the best result via education, sports, and the like for the people of the Cayman Islands. That being said, can the minister or the chief officer explain the Safer School Initiative that is in line item MEG4 that is in the budget statement?
Mr. Chair, the Chief Officer will respond to the Honourable Member.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. The Safer Schools Initiative is an initiative around creating safer school climates using a myriad of approaches. One of the approaches historically used by the ministry is the advent of pastoral support workers in 5 employees in various schools to supplement school staff in assisting with behavior management and supporting students who are having difficulties managing their behavior. The major initiative under Safer Schools Initiative is the PBIS, Positive Behavior Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports Framework. This framework has 3 tiers. We are currently moving through or past tier 1 into tier 2. But basically what this does is it creates positive support, positive reinforcement, and recognition of strong behavior in schools. As you know, it's quite easy to recognize poor behavior and to address poor behavior in terms of exclusions, in terms of detentions, in terms of any other steps that schools would take. But what we find is that positively reinforcing the behavior that you want to see is actually a better method of ensuring that that behavior takes into the schools. So the positive behavior intervention support system, one of the tenets of that system is that every child, every school was given the opportunity to develop their school theme. And that school theme might be an acronym made up of 3, 4, or 5 words. And one of the tests for the success of implementation is that you should be able to approach any school child in the Cayman Islands and ask them their school theme. They should be able to recite it for you without hesitation. The support system, as I said, tiers up, and so we're going through phase 1 into phase 2 and phase 3, and we're implementing this not slowly, but efficiently and effectively to make sure that the climates that we want to achieve are achievable, that we're not overloading teachers or students with this type of reform. And so far, we are seeing very strong results from the implementation of PBIS. For example, over the last year. High school exclusions reduced 25%. The number of days lost from high school exclusions reduced 61%. And the number of high school students excluded reduced 49%.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and follow-up, can the minister say if there's any new initiatives outside of what has been outlined before taking the post of Education Minister that she plans to implement in respect to the safety in the schools?
Through you, Mr. Chair, as I said, in terms of PBIS, we're leveling up, so we won't stop where we're at. What is also under constant review in terms of safe environments in schools is our child safety and protection. We have a myriad of child safety policies. We constantly review those policies. We roll out a program to ensure that our teachers are trained in things like safe handling, but also recognizing abuse. We are working with our students to make sure that they understand the different types of abuse, that those things are wrong, what avenues to take to have it addressed, how students can support other students through peer support programs. We also are rolling that out in terms of people who volunteer in schools. And I'm also happy to say that under sports, which started happening in the previous administration, but sports associations and organizations are also being given training to recognize abuse and to make sure that children in their care are kept safe. One of the additions for this year is deeper work in terms of family learning, communicating with families in terms of how to connect with the education system, how to manage their student performance, how a parent should be involved in ensuring the greatest success of their children in education. And that is something that we have started the foundational steps on in October of this year, and we'll be rolling out in January 2018 in terms of commencing that strategy in schools.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Is there any collaborative efforts with other agencies outside of the education that you're working with to help in your efforts to make the schools safer?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the list of collaborators in education is so long that I'm in danger of not mentioning everyone. We liaise closely with the Department of Children and Family Services, the Family Support Unit in the RCIPS, Family Resource Center, and other government agencies. One of the items of support that is not seen all the time is things like when other government entities come into school for career days or to support, for example, in the past, the Agriculture Department has supported schools in terms of their Grow Box programs. All of those things have positive impact. We also have a long partnership with Literacy is for Everyone, known as LIFE, in terms of literacy support. We have a long partnership with CISPA in terms of numeracy strengthening. KPMG, I won't name all of the different private sector organizations that are supporting education either through sponsorship or through taking part in school activities and the like. We also have our after-school program, our extended after-school program, which is contracted out, and the current contractor for that program is the YMCA. We also work with the hospital, with private therapists, through liaison with Hope Academy and other private schools, and various organizations that support youth development, such as Youth Act.
Mr. Chair, through you, just for confirmation purposes, YMCA is a Christian-related program, am I correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that is my understanding.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, can the minister say in respect to the discipline policy, has there been any changes from the former administration to this one? Because we all know that the minister is a very strong advocate for discipline, like myself, in respect to the schools. Has there been any new additions to the discipline policy in the schools?
The newly established Education Council has been mandated to look at that. Obviously, if I've said before, and I will say now, that I'm not particularly happy with some of the situations that are in the school, but let it be abundantly clear that we cannot lay the blame entirely at the foot of the educational institution, because those children come from somewhere. And before they leave home, the parents have the first responsibility to ensure that their children are taught in the fear and admonition of God. This is still a Christian heritage. I'm not afraid to say that publicly. But secondly, to respect others, because we come from a very rich culture where we are taught that manners take you further than money do. And I think we need to return to some of the old paths, and the teachers will have more time in the classroom to teach rather than being behavioral police.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Member for George Johnson, could I ask you to give way now to let me recognize
Mr. Chair, in all due respect, Mr. Chair, I've sat here in the committee for the last 4 days straight, and you gave leeway to other members in respect to the line of questioning. I sat patiently. I have a line of question in respect to education. I really like to get them answered. I think it's unfair if you don't allow me to finish my line of question when you've given other members in respect to one line item.
Give everyone a chance to ask their questions.
Okay, I'm almost done. I'm almost done.
The member from East End started, and I gave way to you, and I want to give it back and have let people continue. You will get your opportunity, sir. Member for East End.
Mr. Chairman, I mean, I'm easy because I can remember when written down. If you want to go on with him, I'm fine.
If you're happy to give way, so I'll
and then come back to me. That's fine,
okay,
because it breaks the Trina question.
I'm happy to do that. Go ahead, member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the member from East End. Can the minister say what is her position in respect to hair, earrings, and the way children wear their clothes in school? Because of we've heard your position in other statements about your concern about it. In respect to what we've heard in other forums about the rights of children in school, and particularly in respect to their hair, in respect to their earrings, and sometimes even in respect to what clothes and how they can wear their clothes, how do you plan to effectively take your viewpoint and combat that with the struggle of the right of children in school to effectively do the job of strengthening your discipline policy in the school?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to the Honourable Minister. It is no secret that this minister, from a personal perspective, does not support children going to school looking like they're coming from some hippo nightclub. Having said that, I'm not here to exercise my personal purview. I have asked my able counsellor, Councillor Barbara Conley, to take that on as one of her responsibilities, to look with the aid of the legal department at the legality of it, because nowadays everything is covered with this superhero quote of Bill of Rights. I want to ensure that that is in fact the case, because as far as the minister is concerned, if it is legal, and if there's something that we can do to make it legal, if it isn't legal, I am more than happy to put it through my caucus to get the feedback. But I believe that how one is attired and how one is dressed, although you cannot necessarily judge, Mr. Chair, a book from its cover, it goes a long way in the marketing promotion of persons buying that book. Simply put, when these children come out of our schools and the modus operandi of ascertaining, obtaining, and maintaining a first-class education in the Cayman Islands, when they walk into the courthouse, they can't walk in like that. When they walk into Mapleson, Calder, or Appleby, they cannot walk like that. And I would venture to say when they walk into Guap, they cannot walk in like that. So why train our children that it's okay to go to school dressed any old how? We are Caymanians, and there is not just Cayman kind, but there's Cayman pride.
Mr. Chair, through you, I only have two more questions. And I want to say I support the minister in her respect. And if there's anything I can do to support you in that position, please feel free to reach out to me. I look forward to hear what your caucus comes back with in that respect, because I think it's something that many people in the Cayman Islands want to know, how you are effectively going to change that attitude in respect to the human rights. But I'll move on to my next question.
But if I could just beg your indulgence, I think we can effectively change it, even without going to human rights, if all of our Caymanian parents, who I know better, send their children dressed as they ought to be.
Through you, Mr. Chair, can the chief officer list, through you, Mr. Chair, to the minister, can the ministry and its representatives list all available VTech programs available in the schools and outside the schools? We've had comments saying that there's many, and I've still yet to receive how many they are. I think it's important that members of the public know what is available to them.
Mr. Chairman, obviously the ministry has it composed. They do not have it right here. The minister will undertake to give it to the member, and he then can have the opportunity, if he so wishes, to let his constituents know. I can also ask the promotional officer within the ministry to do a spotlight on it, so that the members of the public who do not yet already know can refamiliarize themselves with the programs that have been existing for some time.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you for that answer. And I'm happy to get the answer at another date and pass it on to my constituents. Last question. Can the ministry and its representative list any fees that parents have to pay for their children? Because my understanding, Mr. Chair, is that education in this country is free. That doesn't mean free with a few fees. It means free. To my understanding, Mr. Chair, that there's a number of examination fees that need to be paid and one or two fees here and there. I want, from a constitutional perspective, I want the ministry and its representative to say, from a legal perspective and constitutional perspective, are they allowed to charge students fees, or their parents rather, in respect to anything to do with education?
You're talking about public or private?
Public schools. I apologize.
I'll ask the chief officer to so respond, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you. Mr. Chair, I believe, well, first of all, there are two sets of fees that are currently being charged. Two sets of fees that are currently being charged in the education system. We have school fees being charged for non-Caymanian students. Non-Caymanian students and Caymanian students are charged exam fees. And there is a $25 per month charge for the after-school program, which is currently under review. I believe what the member is referring to is the constitutional right to education. In the Cayman Islands Constitution, the right to education is recognized as a progressive right, which means that the country would, over time, budget allowing, take progressive steps to realize free education. But it doesn't guarantee, it's not an absolute right, it doesn't guarantee free education at this point in time.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair, I bear your indulgence. Obviously, you can see that that needs a follow-up question. I didn't intend to. I was hoping that he would have just said that it was all free. So what I understand, and just for clarity, is that education is not technically free in the Cayman Islands.
Mr. Chair, thank the honourable member for that answer. I'm sure the member would fully appreciate that the only thing that is absolutely free is salvation. He would also appreciate, having done the process of deducted reason and a full forensic analysis, that the Cayman Islands, perhaps, except for some communist countries, have the freest and the best education that money can afford. To be able to pay for examinations, it's there because the government doesn't actually manufacture money every Monday morning or Friday morning. So in order for us to be able to cover every single minutia in education or in other services, it means that we have to take it from the public. We do not have consumable or income tax, neither are we desirous to have it. We're a service industry, and this government has said there are going to be no new fees. So in order for us to maintain that promise to the public, which I'm sure he will come on board and agree because he campaigned with that, we have to continue with the area that we're in until the resources, coercive revenue resources is changed. And I can assure you, knowing the Honorable Premier and my colleagues in government, that will not happen during this term.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I want to thank the Minister in that response. I'm certain that the Minister and his administration and her administration is aware of the difficulty that many Caymanians are finding themselves into in respect to the cost of living. And that's just one more cost, regardless of how small or minute some may say it is, it's still a cost. And if you think it's small, you may be not in full understanding of the difficulty of many. That being said, can the ministry say if a person is unable to pay that fee, is there other options available to them for it to be paid? The reason I ask the question is because we've had students who can't get access to their examination results as a result of not paying the fee, regardless of how small the fee is. If a person doesn't have it, they doesn't have it. So is there other options available, whether it's the needs assessment unit? Can you explain to the listening and viewing audience what options are available for them to still take the exam, get the exam results, if they don't have the money available to pay those fees?
Thank you, Honourable Member, for the question. Absolutely, as was illustrated in part of his question, there are other avenues available. No child is denied an education because they don't have that fee. They can go to the needs assessment unit. Obviously, a lot of them come to politicians, and some politicians are generous enough over the many years to assist them, and I'm sure we will continue to so do, because we know our people, we know those who actually have a need. We also intend to look at that policy which I inherited to see whether in this time that we're now in, that's a relevant policy. But I can assure you that no child is denied access from education in this country. We are here to nation build, and that may be part of the tweaking. When I said that it's a small amount, I indeed meant that it is a small amount. And if parents prioritize, the majority of them, education will come closer to the top over getting pedicures and manicures and the hair done.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That ends my line of questioning. Thank you.
Member Freestone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I would like to ask the Minister if at this stage there are any plans for any legislative changes to the education law in order to affect the delivery of education as you see it, whether it's your new objectives or anything of the like.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to thank the Honourable Member from Easton. As I met with the Chairman, one of the first aspects of the discussions was that inner law is evolutionary and the education law is no exception. I asked the Council to look very closely at it to see what provisions needed to be changed based on any new mandates that may be emanating from this government or from the society on a whole, and that is what they're actually doing. So it would not surprise me if we came out within the 4-year time to make changes to the education law as we've done with most of our legislation that we've had. It does not mean that the education law as it now stand was not as perfect as it could have been at that time, but we are a growing nation, and in order to keep growing, we have to change.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, sir. And that's precisely what I meant. Maybe I should just ask directly the minister what if she subscribes to the devolution of authority and responsibility in education, and maybe that's where I was going to see if you were going to answer in that direction, but I'll just ask it directly.
I subscribe looking at any mode of education that will serve the purpose of moving us to world-class education. So in order not to handcuff the deliberations of the council, I will not give 100% commitment, but I'm open-minded to look very closely and analytically to their decision. Obviously, it would have to be a consultative process. It will have to be a process that passes the majority of the Cayman Islands people, and if need be, go to a referendum. But education will be a priority in this country because that's the mandate my government has given me. If it takes that, that's the vehicle we will ride into town.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I support that position. But do you believe there is a need to change whatever we have been doing for the last 80 years? There needs to be, because of the new global requirements, and this is no reflection on anyone, because the requirement for us to complete globally is changing, not on a yearly basis. It seems to be changing on a daily basis. But do you believe that there is a need to change the approach of the past?
Thank you, Honourable Member. Through Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, the government in which I'm privileged and honoured to serve in believe that the only thing that you cannot change is a dead person and a fool. And because we do not fall within that category, as is the case of the member from Easton, who also believe in change, that is one of the primary reasons I accepted responsibility as Minister of Education. I had no intention of being a rubber stamp, neither did my government had those legitimate expectations or illegitimate expectations. So change is inevitable. The magnitude of the change is where the balance requirements will come in. And I believe that we are adequately equipped with the cooperation that we're getting from the opposition and the cooperation that we hope to get from the wider public as we go about and consult and educate as to where we are. Because there is some fallacy inherent in some of the conclusions, but perception is actuality in persons' minds. So I think that we ought to, and we are, beef up our promotion within the ministry to let them know what education has been doing, but still in the ministry and in the department be receptive enough to know that it's not a personal thing, that change is imminent, and we have to get on board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank the Minister for that answer, because she does know that, like my support for the other minister, her predecessor, she has my support on education, and I'm prepared to make my necessary sacrifices, whatever they are. If it means whatever, I am prepared to make the necessary sacrifices in my personal life and otherwise my political life to ensure that education. And I certainly support your view on the discipline, because I believe it all starts at home, but then if I am going to educate your child, then he or she's going to get educated in the manner that I prescribe, not in the manner that you send me here with long hair and pierced ears and earrings and pierced eyebrows and eyelids and the likes. That's not how it's going to go. But those are my caveats for my commitment to educating our children in this country. There must be some disciplinary measures put in place. I know one of your predecessors, the now premier, took that up when he was there, but within It didn't last as long as a snowflake does in hell. It just wiped right out. But we need to get back there. If you don't want us to educate your children in this manner, then you take them to private school. Mr. Chairman, the chief officer, in his response to one question from the member from Georgetown, said that on fees, he distinguished the difference and said that non-Caymanians and Caymanians pay fees. I wonder if the minister can say, I was unaware of that non-Caymanians, what are the conditions under which non-Caymanians are in the public school? Because I thought they were, the immigration department had reserved that for their decision and send people over to the private school, which I didn't like anyway.
Mr. Chair, as an honourable member observed, he is correct. As space is available into our public schools, non-Caymanians are allowed in, but there's a hierarchy of priority, and obviously that does not fall in the #1 priority. But if those other priorities of Caymanian, married to Caymanian, etc., or civil servants, then if there's space, they're allowed in.
Mr. Chairman, I'll have questions on the different ones, the primary and secondary and the likes at a later stage.
Okay. Member from Savannah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In light of what we were talking about earlier on in regards to the dress code, etc., within the schools, I remember from the last Finance Committee, we expressed our concern, and as I and my colleagues, and I'm sure all of my colleagues within the Legislative Assembly from both sides of the House, see the way that some of these students go to school. I think we need to get a hold of it. I will just read briefly from Proverbs 19 and 18, and Madam Education Minister, welcome you on board with your Christian principles. It says, discipline your children while there is hope. If you don't, you will ruin their lives. Then there's another saying, teaching cannot be left to schools or churches. The primary people in a child's life are his or her parents. The responsibility is unavoidable. Let us, as representatives, because the breakdown in society does not start just like that. It continues to grow and grow and grow and grow. I will just use an illustration of the members of this Legislative Assembly, with maybe the oldest one and my other colleagues in here. As we were growing up, as we were taught the way we carried ourselves, we didn't get in here by accident. We got in here by people looking at the way that we lived, our families, and the way we advocate in here for our people. Why is it so hard for the bureaucracy not to understand? And as I said in my debate, let us get back to basics. We know what put Cayman to one of the most successful little territories in the world. Why are we gradually letting outside forces from the great United States and the mother country, and I'm not sure about the mother country, if she's a mother anymore to us. Let us pull up our pants and take this country back from those who will want to infiltrate in subtle ways to destroy these islands. Wake up, Cayman. Wake up, parents. It is your God-given responsibility to raise those children and not wait to go to the schools and blame the teachers and so on and so forth. We must support the system. We must promote and help those parents that need help. As we know, many one-parent houses in Cayman. Let us support them with good intentions, and you will see down the line, the benefit it will come to these islands. Thank you.
Member from Newlands, you had questions? No, sir? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, it was mentioned earlier, to the Minister, it was mentioned earlier that about the pastoral support in our schools. My question is whether that will continue.
Thank you, Honourable Councillor. Through you to Mr. Chair. Currently, there are 4 pastoral individuals that assist our school system. It's a program that was started and carried on from the last administration. As I understand it, that is intended to terminate in this financial year, but I'll ask the Chief Officer if he can add any further light to it.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the program is coming to an end. The contractor that is providing the service has decided not to provide the service any further. However, the types and volume of support that were being provided by the pastoral support workers can and will be provided by the addition of staff to schools. The work that they were doing was supporting students, doing pullouts of classrooms, liaising with parents on behavior and those kind of things. That is the work that schools have to take on now, not as their primary remit, because our primary remit is to educate, but in dealing with the socioeconomic issues of the day. Our teachers take that responsibility on, as well as our support staff and the specialists who service schools. So in terms of a reduction in the ability to meet those needs, that will not happen. Our ability to meet those needs will increase with our increased staffing.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
yes, ma'am.
thank you for indulging me. Perhaps in response to the questions, and as I listen to the response, I would like to reserve the right as Minister to keep it under active consideration, and if we find that within the first quarter it is not working, to be able to come back perhaps under 11.5 to reinstitute it. I've said that because having visited Easton School, and I think it was either Savannah or Bodden Town, I had the opportunity to meet with the 2 pastoral persons in the school, and both principals were very passionate about the need to retain them. So I'm taking the lead from within the technical staff at this stage, but I would like to reserve a right to review that situation perhaps as early as March next year.
Mr. Chair, through you, just one question for my edification. Do we still have religious education in our public schools?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. And at
Thank
least
you
for
very
4
much.
more years, and when this government gets re-elected, for 4 more years again.
All those in favor of EGA1, Policy Advice, Governance and Ministerial Support Services of $6,103,744 in 2018 and $6,576,646 in 2019, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against, no. The ayes have it. EGA4, Public Library Services for $1,588,434 in 2018 and $1,594,621 in 2019. Are there any questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Member for Bodden Town West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, sir, to the Honourable Minister. This cost, does it also include the number of the library, the people that work in the library? And the reason why I'm asking is I noticed that the costs have slightly gone down, and I know there were some pay stagnation issues within the civil service. So I was just curious as to whether, if it did include, 1, if it did include staff costs, and then 2, if there were any increases to the staff that works at the library.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Yes, it does include staff remunerations, and the Chief Officer will give an indication as to why there's been a dip. while he's consulting, I would give a guesstimate that a lot will have to do with efficiencies that they have done in the system, but I'll give him an opportunity to so expound.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the reduction in the value of the output is actually due to efficiencies realized in managing the library services. And so less money was asked for this year because the head of libraries was able to maintain and manage supplies and consumables with greater efficiency than previously. The library also receives from time to time donations from the public and from organizations, and so those are factored in to our overall funding. So to confirm, salaries are included in the output cost, and I'm also happy to report that we will have an addition of 2 posts. We had 1 post previously budgeted for, but due to a disciplinary matter, that post could not be used effectively. We are now beyond that, and so that post will be filled momentarily, and we have 1 new post for libraries coming up in the next financial year.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to know how many literacy programs are offered across all the public libraries. I'm focusing on Bordentown, but I'd like to know how many are offered across the board.
Mr. Chair, we'll invite the librarian to respond to that. She is very, very passionate about libraries, so sit back, relax, and hear a good story.
Ramona Melody, Director of the Public Library Service. Through you, Mr. Chairman. We have 70 programs that happen annually. It varies between 70 and 75. Some of these programs begin at the beginning of the school year and last all year long, and some are annual programs that are rolled out for shorter periods of time. They include reading programs for early years. They include programs for teenagers that are after-school programs, and pretty much everything in between. We have some literacy programs even for adults, English is second language program that goes on from December through the following year, and they occur at each of the branches.
Are you able to break it down into by district, by library?
Yes, sir. The annual programs, of course, go across the board. And so we have approximately 11 programs that we roll out each year annually across the board for each of the programs. Then we have approximately 20 programs per district, and with the remaining programs happening at the Georgetown Library.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm trying to drill down into Bordentown specifically. I didn't want to leave anyone else out, but I'd like to know how many literacy programs are available in Bordentown at the Bordentown.
Oh, I'm sorry. For Bordentown, that would be 20 programs, and these are after-school programs. These are play, read, learn programs. These are also programs that require that the branch manager go out into the field to the various schools.
Okay. Thank you. The other question I had was on the ICT setup at the Bordentown Library. I know that there were some issues with computers and connectivity. Have those now been resolved?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. Many of them have been resolved. We do still have some problems, however. And last year, we spent $26,000 getting new computers that we distributed across the branches, with 4 of those new computers going to the Bordentown Library. The librarian does report that the networking is better now, and that of the 9 computers that we have at that branch, 8 of them are functioning and 1 of them does not function well. It does happen to be the staff members' computers. So naturally, he's not real happy with that. We are sending someone out to take care of it.
Thank you. And more of an observation and a suggestion, but I've noticed, through you, Mr. Chair, that a lot of individuals who are unemployed tend to use the Georgetown Public Library. Some use it just for a place to go during the day. Some use it to go and work on resumes and so forth. Are we focusing any programs on those individuals who tend to use the library day to day as a place to, as maybe their only place to go during the day, so that we can find ways to assist them and help them with seeking employment or training or whatever? Maybe, I know it may be a little bit outside of your remit, but because they're attracted to the building, it might be a good idea to try to work with them.
Thank you very much for that question. Through you, Mr. Chairman. This new post that has finally become available is a post for a professional librarian. And some of the services that we have not been able to focus as heavily on, we will be able to turn our attention to. One of them really is the introduction or the enhancement of some of our computer programs and job skills classes for persons like the type of population that you mentioned. We realize that they don't have a place to go, but there are other people who possibly have not even thought of coming to the library who might then want to use it. We also note that there are many people who really do not have computer skills at all, meaning that they have never even touched a computer, who could benefit from the new services that we are intending to offer. The other service that we are going to be providing is one that really will attract people who may not be able to physically get to the library, and that is our bookmobile service, which we will be rolling out. We're very, very excited to be able to deliver this program. And for persons who live out in, for example, the Boddentown area, but cannot get there, we'll still be able to access books and materials.
Member Freestone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I wonder if the minister can tell us, like Boddentown, how much of those computers, how many of the computers in the East End Library has been upgraded?
Through you, Mr. Chairperson. Thank you very much for that question. 6 of them, there are 6 there, and all 6 of them are working right now. The only one that is not, there is one that is not working, and again, that is one of 2 staff computers. So one of those staff computers needs to be updated, or actually replaced because it's too old. But all of the computers are now functioning with internet.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask, when were they last upgraded, though?
Before she answers that, Mr. Chair, I can give the honourable member the comfort from Easton that the ministry has also heard the cry of the librarian and that those computers will be upgraded before Christmas. So the ministerial Santa Claus is on the way to Easton as well.
Well, I tell you what, the North Pole is a long distance away. It took him a long time to get there.
Be like Obama having a Daster for Hope member.
Hope under this regime. Mr. Chairman, I thank the minister for letting me know that it is going to be upgraded, because in East End, one of the things is that people use it for resume writing and more importantly for printing, really, for printing off their resumes. I have a complaint, and I wouldn't ask you to be so shocked with it. What it is when the and it's not a big deal, but it needs to be looked at. When the permanent librarian is off or wherever, whoever goes there to fill in that period of time. I don't know if it's managed as well, because I get a number of complaints from those who use it, and it's very much used, the library in East End, kids and the public, the adults. So I don't know if it's so much a complaint. I believe it's bring to your attention that, you know what I mean, that maybe that whoever is placed there has a better appreciation and understanding for what is going on there.
Thank you very much for your concern. Through you, Mr. Chairperson. I am always very interested and very concerned when any of my patrons or community members are unhappy with our service. And when I say that I have an open door policy, in my case, it's really true. I really do have an open door policy. And many of the services, many of the new things that we have been able to do, or the things that I have asked the minister and she has granted for me, have been as a result of people who have cited concerns and said, you know, this isn't going well. We know that the library is evolving, and so if somebody is unhappy with some of the substitute persons that we have in place when the main librarian is gone, if they're unhappy with that, they should let me know, certainly. However, having said that, it's never the best idea to have a series of different people coming to replace someone who is so beloved in the community. And so this new person, one of the new people that we have that has just come on board and just finished her training, will be going out to work more closely with the librarians, because that is going to be the focus of her job, so that the patrons out there will see one or two people, not several. If there is still a complaint, or if there's a complaint about a specific person, though, they can talk to me, certainly in confidence. My telephone number, the telephone number to the main library is, I believe, on the doors, and so they can either speak to the librarian or speak to me directly. I'd be happy to help.
Mr. Chairman, in the interest of transparency, so we don't get it, you realize I was not trying to make it a complaint or more of a concern. And let me say specifically what it was, why I didn't want it to be a complaint. Like, you know, whoever goes there, the patrons come in, and the person just sits there and not say anything. Instead, and then we look at Sandra, the librarian, and she was over everybody, all over everybody. So it's that kind of stuff that people expect, but I don't expect them to be all over people either, like Sandra does, because she grew up in the community. But it's like that kind of stuff, you know. It's not a big deal. The other concern I have is the landscape, and they don't come as often as they should, and when they don't, it just gets out of proportion. And those are the two things that are simple things.
Thank you very much for citing your concerns. Through you, Mr. Chairperson. I know that what you were really talking about was a concern as opposed to a complaint, and no two librarians are the same. However, we do have an obligation to provide excellent customer service. And so maybe the people out there will never feel in the same manner about the substitute people that they do about the person who works at the Easton Library, because she, in fact, is one of our best staff members, no question. However, it is an obligation for every staff member who goes out there to provide a level of service that makes the patrons comfortable and makes them feel like they are welcome in the library building. Even I cover, and I'm always careful to find out what Ms. Sandra has done, you know, so that I can provide that same level of service. So these concerns are good for me to hear, because it means that what we need to do is continue to provide training and development for our internal staff members to make it really one of the best places on the island for people to come. Landscaping. Oh. And part 2, landscaping. Yes, we have had some issues with landscaping, and we have been talking with our facilities manager, who has actually gotten some quotations, because we know we need to enhance landscaping, not just at the Easton Library, but each one of them. And so hopefully we will be able to come up with a plan that allows landscapers to come out more often. In fact, I got the last quote, I believe it was just 2 days ago.
And we are now trying to get picnic benches to put on the other side of the road so we can give Sandra more work so the kids can come.
Member for Boddentown West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, sir. In terms of usage by the different libraries across the different and various districts, do we see usage going up in some or usage going down in some? And if so, is there anything that you think that honorable members can do to probably increase the usage to get more people using the libraries?
Thank you for that question. Through you, Mr. Chairperson. Yes, in some cases, the usage has gone up naturally. For example, at the north side, the usage went up because the librarian began to function as the primary librarian for that school. So those numbers just went up. There are some instances where the numbers went down for a time, and the reason why is because we were just counting persons that walked in. What we found was that some years ago, the people that sometimes were walking in were not there to use the library, but were there for reasons that were less than appropriate. So what we had to do, first of all, was to change that situation so that we could know that the people who came in were wanting to use the library for purposes of information gathering or getting books. Now we are at a place where we see the need, and the need is mostly with adults, not with children. And so that is the reason why we are excited about introducing additional computer classes, strengthening our partnership with NWDA to create more resume writing and job skills related courses. That, I think, will bring more people in. The other thing that we have done is we reopened the historic library back last March, and so that is a venue for persons who want to know more about Caymanian authors and Caymanian history, and also it is a venue where different conferences can actually take place.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Naturally, I'm going to ask the question through you, sir. What inappropriate uses people come into the library for?
Thank you very much for that question. It used to be, some years ago, people would come into the library to sit around and laugh and talk and eat and just misbehave. This was mostly a teenage population that had sort of decided that this was going to be a recreation spot. The problem was that they were not in the library to really utilize our services, which would be information gathering, Wi-Fi, computers, books, or even study. And so then what we did institute some policies to correct those problems. Mainly for young people, we do have them sign in so we know who they are, and we contact parents. Having a relationship, as the Honorable Minister has said, with parents, having that contact has been really an important step in curbing some of the problems, many of the problems that we used to have.
All those in favor of EGA 4 Public Library Services for $1,588,434 in 2018 and $1,594,621 in 2019. Standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against, no. The ayes have it. EGA 5 Primary Education Services for $21,560,869 in 2018 and $22,114,750 in 2019. Are there any questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Member for Savannah.
couple of questions in regards to the IB, the International Baccalaureate programs. Is there a budget specifically for the IB schools? And what is the budget used for?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the IB schools or PYP schools would, as part of the budget process, as with all other schools, would request whatever resources they need for the year. So obviously, schools that are under the PYP program have specific needs in order to satisfy the requirements of that program, and so they would include those in their ask.
Continuing, Mr. Chair, through you, during the recruitment for the teachers, do we concentrate on IB or PYP trained staff that will teach IB at our schools? I think right now it's 2 or 3, maybe 4 of those schools that participate in the program.
Mr. Chair, the Chief Officer has to confirm one aspect of the answer, so if you could beg indulgence for a second.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, when we go to recruitment, there are questions included and analysis included in terms of persons' application forms that will look at teaching best practice that run in line with the PYP program. To be frank, a lot of what we find in the PYP program is best practice in education, whether you're PYP or non-PYP. So we look for those traits regardless of what school it is.
Just continuing in the same vein, how often are the current teachers at the IB programs, schools, and the schools trained, then provided refresher courses, which keeps them updated on the latest practices?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have 2 or really 3 streams of professional development. We have professional development that is requested by principals. We have professional development that the department identifies, and then we have a head of professional development that sits in the ministry and works with DES and schools in terms of their needs. So all professional development needs would be included in the PD plan for the year. Upon request, and so basically there wouldn't be, a specific time for that type of PD. It would be what are the needs of the school and how and when are we going to meet the needs of that school through PD.
Mr. Chairman, just for the final follow-up in this area, is there going to be a transition, as my understanding now through you, Mr. Chair, that this is only exposed in the primary school levels? I wonder, all the effort, and it actually does some good stuff, when is it going to be transitioned to the high schools? If there's such a thing as that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, at present, the advent of PYP or IB in government schools is on a voluntary basis. There's quite a bit of work to do in terms of going through the criteria and the qualification to be recognized as PYP schools at the primary level, and same so would be for the secondary level. As I said earlier, what we're focusing on is best practice. How do we strengthen leadership in school? How do we strengthen teaching in the classroom all the way around? And how do we deal with behavior, special education needs, and disabilities? And so, given the massive amount of reform that has been undertaken in the education system over the last 10 to 15 years, we are reluctant, to be frank, to dictate to schools that the system would be moved to an IB system. I believe that is, well, I know that is one of the things that the minister has discussed with us in terms of creating a uniform direction for the system in terms of umbrellaing all schools. And we are looking at those type of questions in terms of curriculum, subject offerings, and also the type of system that we want to be.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Final comment, really true, and I just want to say a big thank you to the minister for visiting at the Savannah School, and I'm sure she sees the many things that we need to do there. And just a gentle reminder, since it'll be another 2 years before we get to a budget session, in regards for the soon great demand of another education facility at primary level within the Savannah, Newlands, and matter of fact, the entire Bordentown district, which we all know is the most fastest exploding district in the Cayman Islands. And I just want that they keep it in the front burner to remember the need that will soon be upon us again. And in a way that we can support from this side, we're willing to do so. Thank you.
Member of Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Chair. Does the Education Ministry give new parents any educational material to help them develop, obviously, the lives of the children? And the reason for the line of question, just for you guys to understand how to answer it, is that there's been concerns by many of the primary schools that some of the children who come to year one come lacking in fundamental development skills, whether it's being able to count, simply spelling cat or dog. And obviously that puts a strain on the primary school for them to now have to catch that child up to what is expected of that child at year one in primary. So the question is there anything that we do from an education department perspective to help new parents? Because by all means, we can't expect, even me, I consider myself an intelligent young man. It was difficult for me knowing what to do when my first child came home. I was actually surprised that the hospital allowed me to take my child home, saying this new life in my hand. And for some other parents who may not be as educated as others, because of lack of opportunities, they themselves may not know that they're setting up their own child for failure if they're not making sure that they're prepared for at least primary school level. So we continue to have a backlog in preparation. So is there anything that we give new parents in helping them for that from day one to about age 4 to say, listen, these are some of the fundamental basic expectations that your child should know by the time they get to primary level? Because some children don't go to preschool.
Mr. Chair, before I pass it on to my chief officer, I think it's suffice to say that we have ensured as a government that there is access, parity and equitable access to preschool. And in fact, now all of our public schools have a reception class except for Red Bay, and that is in the 2018 budget to ensure that Red Bay now comes on part and is a part of the whole standardization process that the minister wished to achieve. The NAU and the family services normally deal with children before they reach our age, which is going up to 4, for accessible to other private schools or assistance within the house. But we found from our experience that it's much easier to teach the child as opposed to teach the parent, who would have already gone through our system. And from a personal perspective, I think that those first 3 formative years should be used for bonding with the parents themselves, and that the parents ought to take up that responsibility of parenting rather than just gallivanting. And I'm quite explicit with my terms because I'm passionate about education around the place. I mean, if you find the time to go and procreate and bring a child into this world, then you ought to take the responsibility of training that child. And I don't say that from a harsh way, but I come from which I'm not ashamed to say, a very poor in the sense of an economic family background. My mother left primary school at age 4 for a number of reasons, but that did not prevent her from seeing the necessity for her children to get an education, which was gathering around the family table and teaching her children and ensuring that the fear and admiration of God was taught to them. And we ought, let me re-emphasize her importance, return to the old past, because government is not a money-making factory. Our parents need to take parenting serious in this country. Otherwise, nation building will end up with a bigger deficit than the United States government now sees.
Bridget, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Go down Bodden Town West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When preparing for this budget, I pretty much had combined EGA 5 with EGA 10, which looked at education, early childhood, and support services. And I can say to this honorable House that when you combine those two, the overall year-on-year annualized increase is roughly $4 million, and which I'm very happy for, because I'm a firm believer that we have to bend the tree from us young, and we need to make that investment in the early stages. So I congratulate the government for making that at least that $4 million increase. One of the things I'm looking for, well, through you, Mr. Chairman, from a question standpoint, is one, the number of teachers that we have within the system. And one of the things I'm trying to understand in terms of the distribution is in terms of, are we looking to increase the number of teachers that we have this year to next year or over the next 2 years? And if so, in what areas are we looking to have the teachers increase? Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I will revert to the Chief Officer because, as I indicated, he did this aspect of the budget, but I'll just make a general observation and commitment to it. I believe that the best investment that this country can make is in its children. Amen. They are not just the future, but our children are now. And when we invest in education, there's a high possibility that there's another prison door that's closed. So I appreciate the complimentary remarks of the enhancement of the $4 million to this particular aspect of the budget. Let me turn it to Chief Officer.
I can't hear you. Okay, talk to you later.
Mr. Chairman, through you, and forgive me if I have to kind of pick at this document because it's not in order. But so if we look at secondary, we are recruiting teachers for math and science to strengthen both of those areas and also to deal with capacity issues, basically ensuring we have enough teachers for proper class sizes. We're also recruiting a technology technician for secondary. Yes, sir. I'm sorry. Okay, at the Lighthouse School, we're recruiting, and Lighthouse will straddle both primary and secondary, but these posts will be relevant to primary. Assistant teacher for reception, an assistant teacher, SEN. We will recruit 1, 2, 3, 4 assistant teachers for the primary level, 1 for reception. We will also be recruiting a early years coordinator for Prospect Primary. That's the PYP program that Member Eden was asking about earlier. We'll be recruiting 3 reception teachers for Red Bay Primary, and 3 assistant teachers for reception for Red Bay Primary. As you know, Red Bay Primary currently does not have a reception program, and so students in that catchment are sent to other schools in close proximity. We have been approved funds to build additional classrooms at Red Bay in order to facilitate the reception program. We also are adding a post for a PYP coordinator for Savannah and a PYP coordinator for Sir John A. Cumber. And we're adding a year 6 teacher at Spot Bay Primary. One sec. And then those posts were are additions to our 2018 budget. In 2019, there are a myriad of posts which include further recruitment of assistant teachers to supplement our response to intervention, which is basically our interventions for students in the areas of literacy and numeracy. And we are also looking at recruiting quite a few specialists in terms of the special areas, teachers in music, Spanish, PE, and assistant teachers for SEN. Sorry, one sec. So we have 3 sets of assistant teachers, and total number of posts that we're recruiting for education is 40 posts. And so you have regular assistant teachers, you have assistant teachers that will facilitate one-to-one delivery for students who need that. And then you have assistant teachers that will be focusing on the response to intervention.
Sorry. Just so we're clear, and well, the bulk of those teachers are going to be in the early childhood programs.
At primary level education, throughout primary education.
The reason I ask, Mr. Chairman, and through you, sir, you may probably, because I'm looking at EGA 5, which deal with primary education services. And when you look at the year-on-year increase in that is actually quite low, but then the bulk of the increase in terms of funding is actually at EGA 10. I know we haven't gotten there yet, but then the question is, should we look at, in terms of combining where we can actually compare cost to cost, because when it says education early childhood, is that part of the primary program? And if so, then why don't we just kind of more combine that to give, I guess, more flexibility within votes? Or is there a situation where the ministry controls EGA 10 or manages EGA 10 as opposed, and EGA 5 is more for basic primary service? So I'm just trying to understand it too. But I see where the money is actually increased. But if you look at just primary services alone in EGA 5, the cost year on year is roughly $500,000 for the next financial year, and another $500,000 the next financial year. And based on the number of increases, I don't think that could be straight to the primary services. So I think it may be some combination. It may be required. Just food for thought.
Not a question then. Okay. Member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question for the ministers. Mr. Chair, not sure how to handle this because the minister is not there. Do you want me to still ask the question?
If the Chief Officer is able to answer, please proceed.
To you, Mr. Chair, does the department and its representatives believe that the monies that have been allocated in this budget in relation to education is sufficient to ultimately make the positive changes that this administration hopes to accomplish?
Mr. Chairman, I thank the honourable member for that answer.
question?
No, that wasn't a fraudulent slip.
Oh.
Mr. Chair, no minister, reasonable minister, would sit here in this honourable house and say that any budget is sufficient. But this minister is here to say that we have a very hard-working and dedicated team. We're very appreciative of the financial environment in which we're now operating. We also have a minister who is genetically encoded to believe that you can take 2 fishes and 5 loaves and end up with 12 remnant baskets. And we are going to take what has been allocated in this budget to do the best that we can. Obviously, it will go much further if it is seen to be a tripartite relationship, where parents do their part, the private sector do their part, and government does its part. That is why I commence my remarks by saying education, while I'm at the wheel, while this government's at the wheel, will not be a political football, and that we have the commitment that if it is deemed necessary to go back for additional funds, that we will have the support. And may I be so presumptuous that that support will be a unanimous support. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, through you, I'd like to give my support from now. If you need it, you can count on Georgetown Central and its representative in that respect. Following up from that, can the ministry say whether or not it has budgeted for potential suggestions by the Educational Council in respect to changes necessary that are related to funding? Because I don't want to, I'm not trying to load the question in any way, but we have who, in my belief, is a very capable individual who will be heading up the Educational Council, and I suspect and hope that the suggestions that will be made to your department are going to be game-changing, in my view. So I'm just asking, is the government, have they made any considerations that though those changes are not here now, and we technically cannot budget for them now, but have you, just like any other projection, have you at least thought to say, have some allocations to the side? Because if not, the ultimate result will be whatever suggestions they make that are related to funding purposes will have to be delayed till 2020. Hence the reason for the line of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank the Honourable Member for his question and his concern. Perhaps if I could give my response by first paying attention to potential solutions. As we budget, yes, we forecast, but because we don't have the elasticity within the budget to do arbitrarily line items, we are confident that with the composition of the board and with the statutory mandate that there are business-minded persons on the board, well balanced with social engineering-minded persons on the board, that they will not come with extravagant, biased and unfounded recommendations. If I may now turn my attention to the second part of your concern, and that there will be change. Obviously, to have change, metamorphosis, or transformation, it involves an element of substitution. So the anticipated additional budgeting may not be a reasonable expectation, but we hope to look at what's there to see how we can augment it, how we can enhance it to make it a world-class education. If there's a need at the end of that substitution or tweaking, I have confidence, as I said before, that the requisite reasonable finances will come and that the private sector will see that our overriding interest is to nation build in this country, which they have enjoyed, live, and have their being, that they too will continue to come on board to give back to this country, as I know they have the wherewithal to so do.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have 2 more questions and I'm done in this line item. Okay.
I'm going to limit you to 2
I try to be as quick as I possibly can. One should be rather easy. Can we get a timeline on when the Red Bay reception classes will be ready to be open? Are we expecting that for September next year?
If I had control over the aspects that Bill the facility, if I had control over the natural resources, seeing that we do live in a hurricane belt, I would say yes. But because I don't, I'm going to say I have an audacity to hope that everything will be done to get it as soon as possible.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Just going back to an earlier part of our question, because you went on to another line, so I couldn't follow up. In respect to the minister said that, there's a burden on the parent to parent, and I agree wholeheartedly. The reason for my questioning before about whether or not the education department provides any educational material to a new parent when they're taking their child home is because, unfortunately, what we as basic educational persons and above expect that everybody has good foundation in education. Sadly, I must say to this committee, there are people in our community and in my constituency who sometimes don't even understand the simple, basic principles of how to prepare a child to say, do you think it's important to sit with a child between age 0 and 4 to go through the word cat or dog? Sometimes they don't even realize that is an expectation. This is where we have this perspective that it's on the education department. A simple DVD for 45 minutes or an hour to say, listen, here's some simple expectations, just to make them aware that that's what needs to be done. Because sometimes they're not aware themselves on the basis that it wasn't done with them. Hence the reason I think this could be a good preventative measure or a good tool in the preparation process, because I've gone through with some of my own constituents who go, well, I didn't know that was expected by me. And I know that you would say, well, boy, you're supposed to get your thing together, you bring a life into this world. But we need to give them every possible tool necessary, and I don't think it would be difficult at all by the education department to put a DVD together with simple, basic expectations of a child before coming to preschool or primary school on a DVD so they can sit at home and watch it, watch everything else. At least they know what their expectations are. And for new parents, it could be at the HSA or every hospital to say, listen, here's a part of material of growth when you're leaving the hospital. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, those same resources are available at the Family Resource Center. The Children and Family Services also do parenting programs. We do life skills with those parents before they become parents in our school system already. Obviously, the member has said that he's already saw a need within Georgetown Central, where he represents, to assist parents, and perhaps if one addendum could be added, if you could direct them to the Family Resource Center or to the Children and Family Services, because those programs are in there, and rather than the Education Department duplicating that, we'd rather take those resources and put into the programs in the schools themselves.
Member Freestan.
Mr. Chairman, I was going on a different line of stuff, but if no one else was on that same line, I'll go ahead. Mr. Chairman, there are a couple things I would like to ask the minister. I would like to know the child protection process. What is done? How is that carried out?
Mr. Chair, the Chief Officer is consulting with the technical staff to give the response.
Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, I will let the minister's expert answer the question.
And we should take note that she's Caymanian, because we beat up when we don't have them, but this ministry has some very capable Caymanians.
I recognize that, Madam Minister. I made every endeavor when I was there too. The only soul I had on my ministry, young Cayman. I enjoyed that.
Shari Smith, Senior Policy Advisor and Manager for Inclusion. Through you, Mr. Chair, and first, thank you, Minister, for that rounding support. A little bit less nervous. In regards to child protection, there are various, I'm not quite clear what aspect the representative is going at, but what I can share with you is that in terms of from the ministry and the department, we have a child protection curriculum unit that we have rolled out and implemented in our schools, in the primary schools specifically, and that looks at helping children to identify how to be safe and being safe in different situations, and how to talk about if they feel unsafe, or how to report if something is, not necessarily going how it should be going. We also provide training for all of our staff on how to identify situations of abuse or neglect. We have a reporting procedure in terms of if something is reported, that is taken to each school, has a child protection officer who takes that report, and then it is passed directly to DCFS, who then moves it on to what we now have is the MASH unit, if they feel that it is a situation that needs to go there. So our role in terms of reporting is taking the information and passing on to DCFS, who is the identified agency for following through in those situations. In the high school, we piloted a program last term where we identified peer persons who we trained specifically on how to be supportive and also to identify abuse or neglect, so that they can, teens like to talk to teens. They don't necessarily like to talk to teachers or the adults. But those teens are trained on how to respond to when another teen or peer would approach them, and what resources are available to them.
Mr. Chairman, I wonder why does it take so long to resolve a report?
Through you, Mr. Chair, when a report is made to us, we report it immediately to DCFS, and then once DCFS gets it, then they determine where it goes. Unfortunately, that is usually where the time starts. Once it goes to DCFS, then it goes to police and so forth. But once a report is made to us, then we will report it to DCFS.
Mr. Chairman, through you, I would ask that the minister look into what takes so long to get these things resolved, because and there's simple little things that doesn't warrant calling in the FBI and MI6, and it takes forever, and we are left with our hearts full and our hands empty, and then at the end of it, people get so fed up, and I'm talking about our teachers in particular, they walk away.
Mr. Chair, based on a response from my technical staff, the member would be fully appreciative that the perceived longevity of resolution of these issues does not lie within the ministry, but it lies within an upcoming, well, I think that minister's already gone, that's responsible for children and family services, but because children are important to the ministry, I give the undertaking that I will intimate to the relevant ministry that the member from Easton perceives that the time is too long, and then we can get a response back as to the relative of the time.
Madam, Mr. Chairman, thank you, Madam Minister, but none about perception. It's actual. You tell them as actual.
Because I did not have the facts myself, I had to be abundantly cautious to say perception, because evidence brings it to conclusion.
All right. It just takes a little too long. There are a couple of the. I hear the chief officer say that we're hiring students, teachers in this budget and the likes. Mr. Chairman, pardon me if I don't know, if I'm not an educator. I see things. I want to know how they work.
You can just ask the question, sir.
Yeah, well, I'll go ask it and maybe you can answer it.
No, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I want to know what we're getting, the teachers we're getting, how are they going to be deployed? I.e., for instance, West Bay has 24 classes. Will each one of those classes have an assistant teacher along with the teacher? And I only use West Bay as an example. I'm talking about all the schools, and if they're going to have, if that is the number to satisfy that per class throughout the primary.
Would a member from Easton be so kind as to repeat the question? The chief officer would like to hear it again.
Okay. The amount of teachers we're getting, will it suffice having a teacher and an assistant teacher for every class? Not every year now, every class throughout.
Mr. Speaker, first of all, we conduct analysis on an ongoing basis in terms of what is actually needed. Sometimes we feel that what is needed is not needed. Other times it is that case. I just say that to say that you know, we constantly deal with these questions ourselves. We constantly look at whether or not we need to, you know, what post do we need to expand in, and we do that with mind of the budget, with mind of headcount restrictions and those kinds of things. At present, we use an equity model. So basically, we take the resources that we get and we apply them as fairly as possible across all schools to make sure that all students are receiving the services. If we were to move the system to one where things like there's an assistant teacher and a teacher in every single classroom, and if we were to then look at all of the other support positions, all of the specialist positions, all of the, you know, making sure that we are within the government system delivering every therapy that we feel could or should be delivered, we would probably be looking at another 500 posts to the tune of probably about another $20 million.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I guess that.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, not to interrupt, but to specifically answer the question. The question, as I understand it, was: are we including in this budget to have an assistant teacher in every classroom?
Well, yeah, but if not sufficient to cover, based on historical data of people being sick and what have you and what not. Maternity leave, the paternity leave, and what have you.
Yeah. All right. So, Mr. Chairman, so in terms of the immediate needs, as I said earlier, we are looking at adding assistant teachers to support in one-on-one interventions in our response to intervention in other areas. So that's how what we're doing is putting the resources to where they're needed the most. The question that I believe the member is asking is more in line of being able to provide supply when there's maternity and required leave and the like. At present, we do have an issue in that there is not sufficient supply for public or private schools on island. And so when we do end up in a supply situation, we do struggle from time to time providing that. However, by policy, we allow the assistant teachers in schools to take the class for a period of time. And by doing that, and bearing in mind these assistant teachers are in the classroom with teachers, and we're providing training for them as assistant teachers. So by doing that, it has alleviated the pressure in terms of not having sufficient supply on island. As you can imagine, at the primary level, it's one problem if you don't have enough people. But at the secondary level, not only you're looking for a teacher, but you're looking at a teacher who specializes in a particular area. So you need to find a chemistry teacher who is not doing anything right now, right? We have been looking over the years at different avenues of addressing this problem. One of the things that well, as I said, the policy we implemented was that assistant teachers could take the classroom for short periods of time. One of the things that we've been looking at is how do we expand the supply list? Because to be honest, there's also another issue in that there are people who may be available, but there's no words that I can use to describe how different the education system looks today than it did 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And so there's a combination of factors here. One of the factors is there's some people that, because of the changes in behavior, don't want to teach in public school as a supply. There's some that we would want to grasp on to the way that we're doing things now, who we've brought in as supply and who've refused to do so. But that is detrimental to the students because it's a person who is creating friction between the direction that the system is moving in and what they want to do. We have some stalwart persons and ex-teachers in the community, and one of the things that we're looking at now is how do we engage them. Ordinarily, we would do advertising twice a year, which we've done in recent years. We'd advertise twice a year for supply to try to expand the supply list. I will confess that one of the ideas that we've had is to employ a group of teachers as full-time supply teachers for two reasons. One would be to deal with these issues where people are out sick and require leave and those things. The other would be to deal with issues, to provide training opportunities. So, through PD, we need to pull a teacher out of the classroom for a half-day training session. We can put the supply teacher into the class to hold the class while that person is getting training and improving their skill sets. We have attempted to do this in previous years. In terms of our target, we have had to cut in some instances. In other instances, we've had to convert those posts because we prioritize special education needs, and we needed the posts in order to fill those needs. But that is an idea that we can use to ensure that there's full-time supply available, along with doing a little bit more work in terms of shoring up and strengthening the supply list.
Mr. Chairman, perhaps in order to add a little bit of efficiency to the process that we're now engaged to, I can confirm to the honourable member from Easton that the petition which he presented to me yesterday, my chief officer came and collected it, and I'll ask my chief officer just to tell him how we're resolving the Easton issue at this stage, so we wouldn't have to get a series of questions to that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll give the background a little bit, if I can, for persons that would not know. We had a situation where a teacher was placed on required leave, and pending the outcome of an investigation. That teacher has been out for 3 weeks. We, according to policy, placed an assistant teacher. The principal selected an assistant teacher to be placed into the classroom. The parents at East End Primary have now indicated that they are not happy with that that arrangement and the policy. And so we offered a seasoned and experienced SSIO to go into the classroom. The parents rejected that. And the parents indicated to us at that point that they wanted a male teacher. And so we have scoured, and as God would have it, we were able to locate a male teacher who is a recent teacher in the public system, no longer teaching in the public system. And that person has agreed to teach in a supply basis for East End Primary. So yesterday, that gentleman was being briefed in terms of getting prepared to go into the classroom and is available to go into the classroom immediately, is my understanding. Just to add to that, prior to this, what was stated was that we were awaiting a supply teacher. We had a teacher who was off on extended medical. Unfortunately, that extended medical got extended further. And so the supply teacher that was going to come into East End Primary had to be delayed at the other school in order to hold on for that situation to resolve itself. What we've been told is that it looks like that teacher will be cleared to return to duties by the 17th of November. And so in any event, we would have had that person available for the following week, unless something unforeseen happened with the medical. But in any effect, we have now secured a male teacher recently employed with the system and available to go into the classroom.
Thank you, sir.
And Mr. Chairman, the chains have been removed and our teachers showed up for duty today. So I'm not sure whether the students showed up, but our teachers did show up.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I thank the Minister and the Chief Officer for the update. And I want them to know that I don't condone the last resort, but I understand the last resort because of historically, those parents have experienced the same thing, and I understand their anger and their concerns. And whilst I do not condone that kind of action, I understand why it was done. I understand that. Unfortunately, maybe they are a little braver than most other people in the country. That you have to appreciate that they stood up for what they believe in. And I applaud people who stand up for it. Not that it may be the way I would do it, but you have to respect that. Mr. Chairman, I would like to ask the Minister if I could get an understanding of this thing called the equity model, because that has escaped me ever since that was put in place.
We'll ask Ms. Monteith to explain for the honourable member in the House.
Lynette Monteith, Director of the Department of Education Services. There are actually two equity models. One pertains to teaching staff. Each school has a teacher per classroom, and the number of teachers in the school depends on how many streams, and by streams we mean how many classes. So if I could give an example, Savannah has 3 classes of every year group from reception to year 6. So there are teachers, so we have seven classes, three streams, so 7 times 3, we have 21 teachers in Savannah. In addition, each school, with the exception of Northside and Edinburgh and East End, has a SENCO. So keeping on the trend of Savannah, Savannah would have a SENCO. There is also a teacher who doubles as the primary years coordinator and the dance teacher. So the total number of staff, including principal and 2 deputies for Savannah, would be 26. So in Savannah, you have 26 professional staff. In addition, schools are allocated support staff in 3 categories. The first one is mainstream support. Each reception, each year one has assistant teachers, and then you have additional assistant teachers to support the students who are on the phase 3 according to our code of practice for SEN. The second set of assistant teachers are those who support the interventions, and those assistant teachers only support interventions. And the allocation is based on the diagnosis and the needs of the students when that bench line was made. And the last set of support assistants are the one-to-one. We have some students who, by virtue of their special education needs, require one-to-one support to assist them with their specific SEN needs. So in a nutshell, that is the equity model for both professional teachers and support staff.
And that is employed straight across the board?
Yes, it is.
So the equity model is basically for staff, what is the penetration of professionals into each classroom and collectively as a school. That is one teacher, one support
teacher
staff
per classroom.
Yeah,
that's in the primary. Yes.
Yeah, one teacher per classroom, and how many assistant teachers per school then?
So through you, Mr. Chair, as I mentioned, the assistant teachers are allocated classroom support depending on reception year 1 and the SEN phase 3 students. In addition, the interventionists and the one-to-one. So we look at, the model looks at the needs and the allocation from the available support assistant occurs based on their needs.
And does that change, say, it appears like we're just about 25% SENs in our school. 25% of the population. Is that fair?
Whilst, to you, Mr. Chair, whilst we're looking for some additional information with regards to the number of SEN, this varies across schools, and
right. Mr. Chairman, that's where I'm going. If it's higher, if we got an average of whatever that is, and if it would be higher in another school, do we still apply that equity model?
So the equity model is applied, as you stated through you, Mr. Chair. If the SEN needs are higher in one particular school, that is taken into consideration. And in addition to taking those numbers into consideration, we look at the students entering primary from the early intervention program. We look at the students leaving primary to the high schools, and we look at the students leaving high school to the further education center. So we do look at the knock-on and the needs there.
Okay, so there's, you wouldn't, I guess, Mr. Chairman, they wouldn't know, or they may know, let them answer it. If, which schools have that, and I'm not asking to disclose the name of the school, which school has the highest SEN population, and how many then special teachers are placed there to accommodate that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we do have that information.
Yeah, but I don't want to know the school because
No, I'm
that,
just
that-
saying,
that- that
yes,
could-
you asked if we had the information.
Right, but
that
I
was
would
the
like to
question.
know if we know that, say that's one school at 30, 40% or something, how many specialists is there to do that compare with other schools?
Through you, Mr. Chair. This is where the model comes in. So in terms of the numbers, there is an allocation according to the numbers of, let's say, for example, the SEN phase 3 allocation. So at primary, between 1 to 5, maximum 5, you would have 1 support staff allocated and so on. So yes, we do have, so we categorize them according to the number of assistant teachers that they do get.
Member for Bodden Town West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, sir. Just out of curiosity, just to confirm, the catchment area within the primary division, the catchment area that feeds into Clifton Hunter is Savannah, Bordentown, East End, and North Side primaries.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you very much. And through you, Mr. Chair, just in terms of population of the grade 6 classes, I mean, what's the total number of grade 6 students in those 4 schools?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would undertake to get that information for the member.
Mr. Chair,
one question, and we're going to put it to the vote.
My question actually could possibly go under sports services, but because we're at a primary, I'm going to ask it if they want to postpone it to then, that's fine. But the question is, through you, Mr. Chair, the Georgetown Primary once had a basketball facility, and throughout the, not the last administration before that, building extra school classrooms on there, the loss to that facility was never replaced. Can they give any indication that it would be replaced? Because the court also facilitates after-school sporting activity for the community. A lot of young men used to play basketball there in the evenings. It's a positive activity, and I would like to see
Mr. Chairman,
it
forgive me for the intervention, but because it's more specific to sports,
okay,
I would ask the member indulgence to deal with it under sports.
No problem.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, since we're going to defer that question, may I ask the last question?
Pardon?
May I ask
So
the
because
last
we
question?
defer
Since
for
we're
now, you want
deferring
me
that
to
one?
let you have
Mhm.
it? Can it be answered elsewhere?
No, I don't think so.
I'm going to start one question, sir, and then we got to put this to vote.
Just in terms of the primary schools and the libraries and the library librarians, do we now have a functioning library and librarian in every primary school?
Mr. Chairman, I'm so happy that the member from Savannah, Newlands, asked that question because as I did my tour, I asked the same question, so that out of the abundance of caution, I'm going to ask the chief officer to respond to make sure that I don't intersperse it with my personal belief at this stage.
Through you, Mr. Chair. With regards to libraries, each school has a library space, and with regards to a librarian, the answer is no. But we are working with the library service to look at providing that service.
Thank you. Quick follow-up. So what's the timeliness on this? What's the timeline? Through you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to exercise what some people in the civil service term as an executive decision to answer this. There is no timeline on it because it requires a policy change. A policy change is coming. Watch the space.
All those in favor of EGA 5 primary education services for $21,560,869 in 2018 and $22,114,750 in 2019, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The ayes have it. EGA 6 secondary education services, $23,555,030 in 2018 and $23,768,793 in 2019. Are there any questions?
Mr. Chair.
Member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, the matter of line of questioning actually relates or is connected to another line item as well, but because I know it's connected to the secondary schools, I think it's appropriate that I can ask it at this line item. And the one of which I speak about is the canine services at the high schools, the secondary schools. And just
remember there's a specific vote for canine services?
Yes, it is.
Yes. Can I ask you just defer it to that? Let's talk.
As long as I'm allowed to ask the question in relationship of the reasoning behind the canine services in respect to education in the secondary schools, because I don't want to be limited to only the canine services only. Hence the reason I brought it up now. But I'm fine to wait till then.
Okay, I'll allow you to go ahead.
Okay. Through you, Mr. Chair, can the ministry say why the increase of canine services from 2017 per year budget of $29,400 increased to $50,000? That's a 66% increase of canine services throughout the secondary schools. And just for a background of information, so the listening audience and viewing audience can understand what's happening at our schools, which gives me so much concern. It says the number of service hours provided per week at our public schools with canine dogs is 26 hours to 30 hours per week. With 2 dogs, does this increase give any indication of anything? Is there something that the public needs to be worried about? Why a 66% budget increase in canine services? And just for description purposes, the description says the provision of canine services is to reduce the incidence of use and distribution of drugs in the schools. I'm saddened today, Mr. Chair, to even have to say that, but when there is an increase in the amounts of hours provided and a budget for it, I want to know if there's something that I need to be concerned about in respect to our public schools.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the Honourable Member for giving us an opportunity to respond. The increase, I am reliably informed, is because there'll be an additional dog that's added to the school. The other reason for the increase is because this minister and this ministry has a zero tolerance to drugs in the schools. And the member is correct that the canine unit is attending the school to ensure that we can seek and find out where the drugs are to eradicate them. But members should also be fully cognizant that none of our schools, although I'm the minister responsible for agriculture and we're encouraging to grow what you eat and eat what you grow, we do not grow marijuana or manufacture drugs. They're coming from the outside.
Mr. Chair, in a follow-up, I just want to make sure that the ministry and its representatives, by all means, don't feel that that was a plug at them in any way. I think that this is obviously a result of them trying to do whatever they feel is necessary to try to solve the problem. The reason why I highlighted it on the floor of this House is for the listening and viewing audience to understand the magnitude of what is happening in our schools, and that, like the minister has highlighted before, only together can the country fight this problem. This is an indication, a signal that we're going in the wrong direction in respect to schools. Parents, community, individuals, politicians, everybody have a role to make sure that this goes in the opposite direction. We shouldn't have to have a budget increase on canine dogs that search for drugs in the Cayman Islands. I've been embarrassed to even talk about it on the floor of this House, but I hope that the discussion today will at least put people on alert to let's start doing whatever is necessary from a perspective of unity to make sure that we control this problem. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Are there other questions?
Yeah.
Member for Bordentown West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, sir. There's 2 questions, really. One, I noticed that there's an annualized drop in secondary education services of roughly $600,000. So I'm just curious as to why the decrease. Secondly, I understand that Clifton Hunter is one academy short. So I just wanted to know exactly when the ministry would be looking to probably add that academy, if they intend to. And then third, the number of kids that we will have graduating from Clifton Hunter this year are expected to graduate. Thank you, sir.
I'll ask the Chief Officer to respond to those three questions.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I will have to ask the member to repeat the second two questions.
Sure. One, there is a 600,000 annualized decrease in the expenditures for secondary education services. So I was just wondering what was driving the $600,000 decrease in the annualized costs. Second, with regards to Clifton Hunter, I understand that there's one academy short. So I'll be wondering if this is something that the ministry intend to add, or if they're going to, what year they're looking to add the last academy. And then third, the number of students that we have graduating Clifton Hunter. One of the things, just so you can understand where my train of thought is with the graduating classes, is that one, as we tour the schools, we're looking at the number of kids that were in grade 6 in the primary that would have been going on to high school to determine the number of spaces that we had. And then also the number of kids leaving. So if I see more kids going in than kids coming out, and we continue along that vein, then it means then at some point there's going to be a capacity issue where you have more going in than those that are coming out. So that's really what it is I'm trying to determine. And then secondly, which this question would have been the follow-up, is in terms of when you also factor in now the number of people that we have, or the number of residents that we have that have permanent residency, where at present their kids are mostly in private school, and we're talking to the tune of close to 5,000 PRs, is that when they become Caymanians, their kids will also then be entitled to the free public service. The question is then would be, what plans do the ministry would have in place for potentially new Caymanians that are already here, or if they believe that they would leave from private schools as to where they are, and what provisions would have been made. So what I'm really looking for is just some level of comfort, because as I go through the Eastern District, I look at Bordentown, look at Savannah, those schools are close to capacity. That's the reason why my colleague from the Savannah and elsewhere is talking about the third primary school. When I also factor in that in my own district of Bordentown West, that there are two developments that will be adding 105 homes within the next 12 months. That means my population will be increasing. I'm also curious as to where the kids for those homes will be schooled. So that's really where I'm trying to get to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chief Officer.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you for that line of questioning. First of all, to address the budget change for secondary education, we have a 2% a 2% fall in the overall value of the output. That 2% actually represents a change in policy in terms of how government insurance is handled. As you can imagine, the ministry is the largest holder of plant, of physical assets. The policy decision was made that property insurance has been centralized into the Ministry of Finance, so we don't have to budget for property insurance any further. In terms of the line of questioning, which basically centers around growth, we are currently designing a master plan using a similar approach that we would use for a project in terms of developing a business case approach to a project. We're actually developing an entire master plan for education, which takes into consideration several factors, including things like granting of PR and status, the natural growth rate. And unfortunately, we can't, we can only predict the economy to a certain extent, but looking at where our growth is in the country and the opposite, and designing a plan and a hierarchy for what schools do we need to do, what building additions do we need to do, so that we have a focused and strategic approach to construction and education for the next 15, 20 years. In terms of Clifton Hunter, it wouldn't be that there was one academy short. When the school was constructed, it was constructed as a 3-academy school, but space was made available for a fourth academy for whatever time that fourth academy is needed. So it wasn't that the original plan was to build 4 and it was shrunk to 3. The plan was always to build a 3 and then expand to 4 when needed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's a quick follow-up. The very first question I had, which was on EGA 1, was concerning the plan or the overall plan for education, and more importantly, what the ministry would consider success to look like. What I would ask more is that as that plan is developed, that at least that is something that's be shared with the public and at least have a good public consultation period, because I think it's important that the public recognizes that education itself is not just a political issue or elected government issue. It is something for the entire country. So I just hope that the ministry at least go through the process to try to get as much people involved as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, the Honourable Minister. I can confirm that the member from Newlands, Bordentown West, whatever, hope is realized and that we will not be taking such a major decision without full and proper and timely consultation with the public, which includes the members of the opposition. Because as I keep harping, First Nation bill, it has to be from a holistic approach, which includes all vested parties.
Questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Newland.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, before we go on, could I just to supplement what the minister was saying, I just want to confirm, and I thank for the opportunity to state, that we are actually consulting at a level that is unprecedented. The education system consults at a level that has never been done before, anywhere near what we're doing now. We consult with teachers on their training and on developing policies. Our policy team in the ministry is actually structured so that, and I'm going to start internally first, so that they are policy people sitting in the ministry, but they work in the department and they are with the department and they work in schools. That allows us to know, to have a touch in terms of what's happening on the ground, to know exactly what's happening on the ground, and to consult on a real-time, day-to-day basis with teachers and with other specialists in schools. In terms of involving stakeholder engagement, some of you will know that we recently started developing the business case for the John Gray High School, and I will use that as an example. We have done consultation with all of the stakeholders in terms of parents, in terms of the students themselves, in terms of the principal of the school and his staff, other specialists, people involved in sports for the gym, and as we design further spaces, we will be consulting with others. For example, in a week or two, we will do a consultation on classroom design, and we're going to be including people like the NWDA TVET specialist to make sure that what we're doing is au fait. And of course, for each phase, we will have public consultation involved so that people have the opportunity to take part in the design for education.
Thank you. Member for Newland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to know, just on the same line as consultation, is there supposed to be a principals consultative committee that's set up that is functioning right now, allowing principals to meet with the department and so forth and give feedback?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct. There are two, well, there are several management structures at play in the ministry. One of them is a meeting that's known as ELF, which is the meeting in which the Director of Education Services meets with her senior management team in the DES and all principals. But there's a second body, which is the Principal Consultative Council, which is led by principals. They will elect a president. I believe it is every 2 years. I believe it's every 2 years. They would elect or every year, sorry, they would elect a president of that council. And that gives principals an opportunity to talk shop amongst themselves and to make suggestions and recommendations to the department.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, is that group meeting on a regular basis? I understand maybe the remit is for the principals themselves to organize themselves and meet, but are we aware of whether or not they are meeting and having dialogue?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct. The principals themselves would organize those meetings, and those meetings do take place once a month.
Mr. Chairman, in moving on to TVET, what TVET type classes do we have now offered at Clifton Hunter High School?
Mr. Chairman, in relation to TVET classes, we don't have that information with us right now. What we've committed to do is to provide the TVET offerings at SciFec and at the high schools, Clifton Hunter, John Gray, and Lehman Scott.
Thank you. And I had a follow-up.
If I may add, Mr. Chair, and visiting that particular school, it was brought to my attention that they are in shortage of various equipment for the facility there, and I've asked the ministry to look to see if at all possible how we can so facilitate the request from the principal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was actually getting to that point because that was my observation when I visited the school as well. My other question in that area was, is it correct that students are asked to pay a fee to facilitate purchase of supplies and so on that may, for these technical classes where, for example, what I used to call home ec, the raw materials that they use and so forth, is this fee still being taken from students so that they have the supplies they're given to them when they take these classes?
Mr. Chair, I'll have to ask the Chief Officer to respond because if there's a fee being charged, this is the first I'm hearing of it.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, through you, there is a fee for home economics, which is approximately $30 a year.
Okay, just quick suggestion as well. One of the complaints that I got from parents in particular is that they're paying this fee, but when the kids are in the class, they don't have the supplies given to them, and they're actually being asked to bring them from home.
Mr. Chairman, again, in the spirit of efficiency and cooperation, I understand it's some $30. I don't suspect that's going to make or break our budget, so I'm going to ask publicly that from a policy directive that be looked into and become a historical item ASAP.
Wow.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'm loving this minister boy. Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, member from Georgetown Central.
I've had a number of my constituents ask the question in respect to why the gymnasium of the development of the school was built first, and I can't answer the question. Can the reason for why the gymnasium was built first before the classrooms be given for public record today? And was it a policy decision or a ministry decision?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we've actually spoken to that decision publicly several times. That decision was taken in 2012. We related to the then government that in order to proceed with the school project, when we were at the point of closing down that phase of the project, we related to the government of the day at that point that when we restarted the project, we would have to restart with either the gym or the admin building or some combination thereof. When the new government came in 2013, we advised the then government the same thing. And then when the project was developed, since development, we have spoken to this often. And the reason I'm stressing this is because I know that people keep saying this, but I can tell you that I personally have spoken to this on the radio at least 6 times. The gym houses the brains and guts of the project. So all of the services that come into the project come in through that building. So when we were looking at designing, how do we properly move the project forward as efficiently as possible, as quickly as possible, and making sure that our services are working, because bear in mind, we're starting a project that has been shelved for 5 years, right? So we had to test the equipment, we had to test the viability of all the electrical lines, we had to test the plumbing. All of those services come in through the gym, right? The building management system would be housed in the admin building, and that's why it was, what portion of the admin building do we need to bring on live in order to do that? So from a construction perspective, it made sense that we would do the gym first. However, in 2012 and 13, we also consulted with the chief education officer and the then principal of the school, and looking at it from an education perspective. Since that time, we've done that consultation again, and as recently with John Clark, the present principal of John Gray, and we've always had the same result. From an education delivery perspective, it didn't make sense to proceed with any of the other buildings first, because the other buildings are one academy, the Performing Arts Center, the gym, and the admin, right? So the admin, I think, is the easiest one to understand. You wouldn't put the administrative offices for a school over on another site while the rest of the school is on this site. The education team went through and they looked at all of the other buildings in terms of functionality and said, well, okay, could we accept one building at a time? Could we accept the Performing Arts building first and Academy first? Would it make sense for that to happen? And from the education perspective, what they came back with was, no, it doesn't make sense to start with any of these other buildings first. It makes sense to start with the gym, because for PE purposes, students could simply go over there for PE and come back. They wouldn't have to be back and forth multiple times a day. It would just be for that one time that they're doing PE. The principal also recognized, in terms of being able to hold whole school assemblies, which was not allowable under the original structure, very useful. What is very, very useful is the ability to properly conduct exams in an environment that is conducive to success. And so, and also holding graduations, as members would know, we held the first graduation in the gym this year. And so for all of those reasons, and there are others as well, the decision was taken that we would go forward with that building first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you, I just think it was important that that be said again, because I even feel bad for the last administration in the respect that the perspective is that the priority for the classrooms weren't there. They were thinking about basketball, and that needs to be clarified, because no government, regardless of what it is, should be given unjustified criticism when the practical approach was from a technical standpoint. So that's the reason I asked the question.
Member Freeston, I believe you had some questions.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, I am on our rounds. One of the things we found was that vocational training, which we have always talked about, the whole country is talking about vocational training. There was not a lot of concentration in the high school. Clifton Hunter does not even have a lot of tools to do it with. What is the government intent on, in the coming short to medium term, doing to ensure that vocational training is, our kids are exposed there to?
Mr. Chairman, the Chief Officer would respond, but as it relates to Clifton Hunter, I responded to that when the member from Newlands asked about the tool deficit at the Clifton Hunter School. Chief Officer.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the ministry is tasked with several items in relation to TVET. One of those items is actually creating the atmosphere that allows TVET. It's not just about TVET courses. It's about developing a framework for TVET, developing a national qualifications framework that allows a TVET qualification gotten in the Cayman Islands to be compared to a TVET qualification gotten from overseas. The approach that we have taken is multifaceted and at various stages. So during the last administration, the National Training Council was developed. We are in the ministry taking a look at that mechanism to further advise the minister. But the idea behind the National Training Council is that the council would be looking at how we build the infrastructure around TVET offerings, not just at the school level, but also TVET at tertiary and further education. In schools, we have TVET offerings at the secondary level, and we have a myriad of TVET offerings at the SciFec level, which is the courses that we're going to make available to members. But what's also happening is that in terms of our career days, we find greater participation of TVET companies. So what we're doing is we're putting together these career days, and some schools do career days at the primary level. But for the high schools, we focus at year 9 and year 11. Year 9 when they're looking at options, and year 11 when they're about to transition to year 12, in focusing on career development. What career do you want? And so we speak about TVET through the careers counselors, through that mechanism. But we also ensure that TVET companies are included in our careers fairs. What we have been tasked with is looking at how we can drill down further into compulsory education to expand the offerings of TVET in compulsory education, and to expand the use of things like career fair and opportunities for students to learn more about TVET subject areas. What we've also been asked to do is to liaise with the University College of the Cayman Islands. The UCCI had a strong TVET program. Over the years, that was eroded due to lack of commitment in terms of people being interested in doing TVET, right? So UCCI is working on a redevelopment of TVET programming that would be available at the tertiary level. We've also gone down the road of exploring apprenticeships and internships in TVET. So one that is highly successful now is the PWD apprenticeship that is available to our SciFEC students. And the number of students interested in that type of programming has grown this year. And we'll continue to develop that type of programming with PWD. I'll speak, if you don't mind, outside of our ministry for a little bit, just because we had the subject area before election. What we were also looking at doing is developing through the NWDA further partnerships with TVET type education institutions. And so last administration, one of the ones that we developed, for example, was bartending, where students would go through a bartending course and they qualify to be a bartender at any establishment in the Cayman Islands. So we have this multifaceted approach. In terms of our students in public education, the key for us will be to expand our offerings and ensure that the mindset, to be honest, is changed a little bit, that TVET and vocational employment is actually valued, because that's one of the reasons why UCCI saw a drop off in interest in their programming, because we have, unfortunately, we've looked at TVET subject areas as if they're inferior to the other academic subject areas, and we've looked at TVET jobs as if they're inferior to the other jobs. So part of that work is in changing the mindset of people to understand, and I dare say, if people really did the research and saw the salaries that were available in some of the jobs that they think are inferior jobs, they would think twice about their career choices.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. That's what I was trying to find out. It wasn't specific about the tools. But then two things. There are people who believe that we should start in primary school. I don't subscribe too much to that. Last year in primary school, and then when you go to secondary, the concentration is there. I don't totally subscribe to it, but I guess if that's what we have to do. The most important one, though, is post-secondary. How is the government going to supply that, press for that? I hear about the UCCI and TVEC up at the UCCI, but are we going to look at the possibility of this being, I think Roy Borden had started sending our kids up to Massachusetts, I think, or something of that nature. Are we still doing that?
Member, could you perhaps elucidate for Chief Officer why you're talking specifically to UCCI? Because if that's the case, then he wants to call the personnel from UCCI to respond.
No. I said I heard him speak of the TVEC that is at the high school, which is post-secondary. But are we still sending people, students overseas as a part of the scholarship program to do vocational training?
My apologies, through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, scholarships are available for technical vocational education courses, and students avail themselves of those scholarships each year.
Okay, thank you. Two other things on the secondary school for right now. Computers.
Members, can I just ask if you direct your questions through the chair, Lisa?
I am. I didn't call them. I just said two other things. And you know where I will say, I know this business, Mr. Chairman, and whether I say it at the end or not, it's through you.
Okay.
Computers at the secondary, at Clifton Hunter, really, where I understand that I think they have like 6 of those carts, and more often than not, only 1 or 2, 3, 4 is working consistently. Is there any plans to put more computers in there? But more importantly, if you only got 6, why aren't they? If you only have 6, Mr. Chairman, why aren't they maintained on a regular basis, kept in working order, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chair, we'll let the technocrat responsible for that aspect respond to the member from Easton.
Mr. Chairman, through you, my name is Stephen Dirksen, ICT Manager for the Ministry of Education. We do have some older computers at Clifton Hunter that we are hoping to, planning to replace in the next year, so I could quickly go through the list of what we've got planned for Clifton Hunter. So in terms of, for next year, we're looking at replacing 255 laptops for students. As the member mentioned, thank you for the question. Some of them, quite a few of them are older. They were purchased either when the school started or brought across. And so we've got a replacement for the following departments: design and tech, 60 new laptops, 30 for literacy, business studies, 20, drama, 10, and for music for 20, and humanities we're planning to replace 40 of the laptops. In terms of, those are replacements of laptops that we're having issues with. In terms of additional new laptops, we're looking at 15 for literacy, 20 for business studies, 20 for life skills, and 20 for Spanish. In terms of the, it is a challenge. It's a large site. I think we need to move towards having a second person on site there, and so in the budget as well is the provision to increase the number on site to 2 for technicians, so that the PCs can be maintained if there is an issue in a more timely manner. But in most cases, the issue is simply the fact that we have quite a few that need to be replaced and are end of life.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I bought that phone 8 months ago. 8 months ago. 6 come out since then, you know. You're telling me, as dumb as I am, I gotta stay with this whole thing. And as progressive as technology is, 7 years we have left computers in that school? And it's changing every 6 months? Is it any wonder if children are not getting what they're supposed to get? Not exposed to this world education that we talk about? Mr. Chairman, I gotta come off that because it sounds like every time we speak or they know we go speak, we get what we need in the schools. Mr. Chairman, I just want to ask, are we going to put back
Mr.
sixth
Chairman,
form?
I don't think the members should be allowed to leave it there as if
Fine.
7 years have gone of famine and nothing happened at the school. So at an appropriate time, I would like my technical staff to have an opportunity to clarify that statement.
No, Mr. Chairman, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that, but that's what he just said, that some of those computers were there when the school started, and it's 7 years since the school's been started.
But there are things called as novus actus intervenius, and some of those might be his ability to maintain and why fix what is not broken. So let's hear why it was not done.
Fine.
Might be a good reason, sir.
Mr. Chairman, anyway, Mr. Chairman, I would just like to ask the minister if there is any intention of reintroducing the sixth form into our high schools.
Mr. Chairman, thank the member for that question. He obviously is on the same wavelength of myself. It affects Cairnbark probably more than in other districts, with year 12 having to come across to Grand Cayman and not from the get-go, not having the proper infrastructure there. I can't give a commitment as to when, because it will take a bit of reshaping, but I certainly would like to hope that it can be before the completion of my tenure, because I think that that was a retrograde step, and I make no apology for that statement.
Thank you.
Did your minister have the response at this point?
Sorry?
I think you said you reserved the right to respond. Are you ready to deal with
Absolutely.
that?
Thank you for your graciousness, Mr. Chair. Please respond.
Mr. Chairman, through you, I may have misspoke there. Some of the laptops were purchased 5 years ago when the school started. However, in 2016-17, we did purchase another 40 laptops for additional resources for classes, 40 laptops for students. In this past year, we also purchased 75 desktops, and we replaced all 3 ICT labs. So all 3 ICT labs at Clifton Hunter are new. We are just in the process of procuring 20 laptops for PE students at the moment for the PE department. That's in addition to the 255 that we'll be purchasing next year. So we do replace. I mean, in a perfect world, we'd replace them every 3 years. Generally, we use them up to 4, 5, or 6, just because it wouldn't be. We just don't have the budget to replace all of our computers every 3 years. But I didn't want to give the impression that they were all 7 years old. So.
Mr.
Chairman, one question more, and then we're going to put this to the vote.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, and we also heard that the intent is to put more bodies on the ground to do repairs. That is in the school. Mr. Chairman, I wonder when that will be done. I didn't hear whether it was imminent or what the time frame was to have more people there to address the technical issues that arise on a daily basis at that school.
Mr. Chairman, through you, we're hoping that we can solve that in January at the beginning of the new fiscal year, as soon as the budget is approved.
Mr. Chairman, in the same vein as that we're operating on the technical side of things, I have a few questions, very short questions.
Well, I'd like to get these questions as quickly as we can, so we can.
I think that these questions the minister will find very useful. With your permission, sir.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, is that an invitation to treat for my good friend from Easton that after lunch he's going to put a block vote and it'll be in the affirmative?
That has to go through the deputy leader of the opposition.
I'm sorry, Flower's not in here.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, let me ask my question.
Member, please proceed.
Are we replacing, well, my question is, when we replace these machines, we're not giving them to the individual students, right? Each student doesn't get a laptop that's assigned to them. And I'm assuming that this equipment is not taken home, it stays in the school.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, through you, that is correct. So we have a combination of computers in the classroom for use by the classroom teacher, as well as shared laptop carts that can be shared across departments. At the high school level, the model is more of shared laptop carts, although there are some shared laptop carts at the primary school level as well. In addition, the ICT lab is a shared resource for all. So we haven't moved to the model where the students take home the laptops. We just don't seem to have the budget or the staffing for that one-to-one model.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I'm wondering whether or not we have looked into using virtualization, where you have, the way it's set up now, I'm assuming you're going to have a physical machine with an operating system installed, all the relevant software installed. Why don't we look into having lightweight machines and all the processing being done on a central server and a virtualized environment? If these machines are going to physically stay in the school, I think that would probably cut your budget in half, if not more, if you would take that approach, because these lighter weight machines being given to the students are easily replaced and not as expensive, less maintenance. You don't need as many people on the ground, technical people fixing them, and there's less chance of crashes and hardware corruption and so on.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, through you, it's an excellent question. Certainly at the server level, we've moved a lot towards virtualization. A lot of our servers are virtualized. We did try several virtualization pilots in the classroom using thin clients. Some of them, the operating system was running on the thin client itself. Some of them back to a server. Some of the units we've had were connected. There would be one PC in each class, which would run several thin clients. We've actually been using those for the past 5 years. Those are now end of life, and so we need to come up with a replacement. So that's as part of the procurement process. We have to decide: are we going to buy laptops? Are we going to buy convertible laptops? Or are we going to buy thin clients? So perhaps that's something that we could discuss further with you offline. For some, we've also researched some pilots in terms of the best procurement going forward.
Thank you. Yep, I'm happy to help in any way.
Member for Georgetown, please be as quickly as you can.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, can the ministry say if they have had any difficulties in the traffic with the school buses, simply on the basis that I've had a number of complaints by parents of concerns when the buses are dropping their kids off, that members of the public are not adhering to the rules in respect to the school buses when they're dropping our children at home. And is there any new actions or plans to address that problem? Any collaboration with the police department in respect to it? Any advertisements and letting the public be aware of what the protocols are in respect to when you see a school bus? Because I would hate to know that one day one of our children are injured in any way. So is there a proactive approach to this continued issue the ministry can speak to?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, from time to time we do work with other agencies to address this issue, whether it comes through complaints from the public or other avenues. We do meet with the contractors regularly, and the bus drivers themselves will let us know, or the wardens will let us know what the road experience has been like. And so from time to time, we do reach out to the RCIPS for assistance, which we are looking at right now. In addition, we use some PR. I believe last year we had a television promo designed to remind the public of the rules as it relates to school buses and stopping and those kinds of things.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I put this to the vote. All those in favor of EGA 6, Secondary Education Services, $23,555,030 in 2018, $23,768,793 in 2019. Standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against, no. The ayes have it. Members, this is a convenient time to take the lunch break. It is now 20 minutes to 1. We shall return at 1:45.